Hey everyone, this is David B. And I saw this article today and I've been thinking about it a lot and thought I would share some of my thoughts. And this is from NBC News. It's called University of Toronto Under Fire for Giving Hell Money to Asian Students. Asian students at the University of Toronto are calling for their administrators to take action after staff distributed, quote, hell money in traditional Lunar New Year envelopes last week. The banknotes were given to students at a graduate student residence in place of cash normally given as gifts during the season. The notes are meant to be used in specific ceremonies around someone's death, but when sent to the living, they can imply ill will and are highly offensive. And the article goes on to talk about how students started a Change.org petition calling for a more thorough investigation and additional steps by administrators to combat anti-Asian racism on campus. And it goes on to talk about how the school apologized. The one sentence I think is important to point out. It says, administrators wrote, "We have concluded that the error was not intentional or malicious." And let me just read the last paragraph as well. This is from the petition. Given the current social tension and discrimination against Asians during COVID-19, receiving hell money from an institution that claims to be equitable and inclusive is extremely upsetting to students who have trusted U of T to be a safe and embracing land for diversity, the petition said. Let me first say I've been learning the Mandarin language for about 3.5 years now, and of course, learning a certain amount of Chinese culture comes along with that. And I do a lot of online English tutoring, primarily of people from China. So that's why this article caught my interest, since Chinese and China and Chinese people have become such a big part of my daily life. Now, this whole concept of hell money was something I wasn't really familiar with. And so I posted this article, or actually a different form of it, on HelloTalk and asked for what people's reaction was. And it turns out that Chinese people had a pretty strong reaction of how offensive it is to send hell money to a living person. So I think there's no question that if this was done intentionally, it would be considered very insulting. Now, on the other hand, this is the kind of faux pas that I'm terrified of making, because since I've been learning Chinese for a couple years, I feel like I know a bit, but I'm probably in that dangerous zone where I know a little bit, but I don't know enough to avoid these kinds of faux pas. Not that I think I would have done something like this, but I could imagine how someone could make this mistake, right? They think, we're going to be celebrating the Lunar New Year, so how should we do that? Well, let's send some envelopes. And maybe they go online and they look up some details about it and they say, oh, you send money. Okay, well, what's the next logical thing? Well, we can't give real money because we don't have the money to give everyone. So let's just give fake money. If we give fake money, that will kind of represent that we're trying to give them real money, and they'll appreciate the thought. It's the thought that counts, right? Right? And you look online or in a store somewhere, you see, oh, there's this fake Asian money. That'd be perfect. We'll put that in. That must be what they do. Well, it turns out that's not what they do, and you've made a really big mistake. And this is the part I really want to talk about, because obviously there was a mistake made here, and you would have thought that the person would have at least checked with a Chinese person and asked, like, hey, this is what I'm planning to do. Is this a good idea? And they would have found out, no, that's not a good idea. Don't do that. Apparently that step never happened. But I was thinking, what if someone made a similar faux pas towards me? They didn't understand my culture and they did something that was a mistake like this. I would like to think that the process would go something like this. The person does the thing that's a big faux pas. It's kind of awkward and embarrassing. Someone takes them aside and says, hey, this was a mistake. And they explain, hey, in our culture, we don't do this. This is the meaning of what you did. That person would say, oh my gosh, I'm really sorry. I didn't understand. Oh, I'm so embarrassed. And everyone would, it's kind of an uncomfortable situation, but everyone learns and you kind of move on from it. And it's the kind of thing, a couple years later, you can imagine everyone laughing about it. Like, hey, remember the time that so-and-so sent us, did this thing because they didn't know any better? So assuming that it's correct that there was no malicious intent and they were trying to do something nice, right? They're giving a gift, you would think that there would be some understanding and forgiveness of the situation. And I think it's sad that the state of the world today is such that it's not handled in the small group where, okay, someone caused offense because they didn't understand a different culture. Let's solve it within the small community. It has to become not just about the university as a whole, but this becomes a big international headline. And you can imagine there's probably the poor schmuck who did this is probably like, oh my God, I never want to go outside again. I'm so embarrassed about what I did. I never want to have to look an Asian person in the eye ever again. And I don't really like how this gets lumped in with things like anti-Asian hate. With COVID, there was a lot of real anti-Asian crime that happened. A lot of people where there was legitimate racism against Asian people just because they were Asian. And to take a situation like this where someone probably had good intentions, but they made a cultural mistake, they didn't understand what they were doing, and to lump it all together, and now we need more anti-racism training, we need more cultural sensitivity training. No, what you need is someone to take this person aside and explain, hey, you made a big mistake with this. And I'm sure the person is probably really embarrassed about it and is glad that they learned and understands that they made a big mistake. My concern is that it takes us to a place where we're more divided, where, well, I'm not going to try to celebrate any of the Asian holidays now because if I make a mistake, it becomes an international headline. And I'm not going to try to celebrate with this group because I completely understand it. So those are some of my thoughts about this situation. And I really wish just people overall could cut each other a little more slack and understand that there's going to be misunderstandings and that mistakes are going to happen. But I'm curious what other people think about this situation. And I definitely want to ask some of my other Chinese friends what they think of this situation. This is David B. Thanks for watching.